My topic now is the eye. I was recently shopping in a small African town. I purchased a loaf of bread in a transparent wrapping in one shop. I then moved to another shop to purchase some paper. Thinking that I would probably pack my bag on the back of my bicycle after purchasing the paper, I left the loaf of bread sitting prominently on the back of my bicycle. The place was relatively crowded. The shop assistant serving me, someone I've known for many years, had a troubled look on his face. He shared his concern with me over leaving my loaf of bread in such a visible location. "Jim, don't you realize that people interfere with your bread using their eyes should you leave it in such a prominent and visible place?" he said. Of his own accord and without charging me, the shop attendant took a black, that is, a not transparent bag, went outside the shop, placed my loaf into the bag so the loaf could no longer be seen as a loaf, then came back into the shop. I recently found myself with African people in a very concerned conversation over a new system of scanning the eyes being introduced into Kenya. The scan measured, according to my interlocutors, the back of the eye, in English known as the retina. The media report I found seemed to confuse, in fact, iris scans and retinal scans. The reason for this concern soon became very clear. The eye retina was seen as the source of the power of evil being used by people to harm others. The practice of making an image of this was something just too dangerous for them to think about. In fact, the understanding that people's eyes emanate evil powers is simply ubiquitous in African communities known to me. This is reflected in behaviors such as that I've mentioned above, of covering food you have purchased to prevent interference with it, essentially insertions of poison into it, by envious people looking at the food. It is also reflected in treatment widely offered for illness, for example, utilization of the service of a specialist who can use his mouth to suck particles out of your body through the skin that have been put there by the envious eyes of others. The ability of eyes to emanate evil is constantly assumed. Some might think that my saying that this belief is ubiquitous in Africa is a little of a presumptuous generalization. It seems to me the problem is the other way around. That is, on what basis of legitimacy do we in Europe constantly assume African people's beliefs to be the same as ours? The tendency to simply assume that what African people and those of African origin think, feel, believe, know, want, and understand is the same as that of people of European origin is very widespread. I believe it's widespread for two main reasons. Firstly, Europeans almost always hear African people speak in their own European languages. African people thus say the same things that Europeans say that they've learned in school as they learn those languages. They often try to say them as Europeans say them to get the most credit. For example, they might say that a stomach bug is caused by a virus. That doesn't mean, though, that they don't believe a stomach bug to be caused by the evil eye. Secondly, is that when they talk like Europeans talk and make out that they believe what Europeans believe, Africans often get massively rewarded with enormous amounts of money, prestigious jobs, respect, and so on. Going back to eyes, a bit of biblical research reveals some interesting developments in the production of recent Bible translations. In Deuteronomy 28:54, the NIV version of the Bible states, "Even the most gentle and sensitive man among you will have no compassion on his own brother or the wife he loves or his surviving children." If we look at a literal translation from Hebrew, we find his eye will begrudge. The word translated begrudge, being ra in Hebrew, eye, bad or evil, means that even more literally this verse says his eye is evil. It may seem strange that the NIV translates his eye is evil with have no compassion. Going back a little further in the same book, the NIV translation of Deuteronomy 15:9 tells us, "Be careful not to harbor this wicked thought. The 7th year, the year for cancelling debts, is near. So you do not show ill will toward the needy among your fellow Israelites and give them nothing. They may then appeal to the Lord against you, and you will be found guilty of sin." If we look at a literal translation from Hebrew, we find, "And be evil your eye toward the needy." So the NIV here translates, "And be evil your eye" with "show ill will." The NIV translation of Proverbs 23:6 tells us that, "Do not eat the food of a begrudging host, do not crave his delicacies." If we look at a literal translation from Hebrew, we find, "of a miser eye." Where the English term miser is used to translate ra, which is bad or evil. So more literally, this is of an evil eye. So then the NIV translates an evil eye using the phrase a begrudging host. Moving to the New Testament, the NIV translation of Matthew 20:15 is, "Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous?" If we look at a literal translation from Greek, we find the eye of you is envious, where envious translates poneros, which generically means evil or bad. So more literally, this is the eye of you is evil. So then the NIV translates the eye of you is evil with are you envious. What I've illustrated above is a pattern that we find throughout the scripture. That is to say that modern translations like the NIV translate away the evil eye phrase that is there in the original Bible. Presumably they do this because there's little belief in or understanding of the evil eye amongst Western English speakers. Yet we have shown that this does not apply to African people as a whole. Hence, a contemporary paraphrase conceals what might be a very helpful translation for African people. I want to look at one more passage, Matthew 6:22-23. Here the NIV states, "The eye is a lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness?" If we look at the original Greek, we find that where the NIV translates, "if your eyes are healthy," it has, "however the eye of you evil," that is poneros, "is." Here we get only a partial occlusion of the original text by the NIV. That is, the fact that the issue pertains to the eyes is mentioned, but the Greek term for evil is translated as unhealthy. The reason the eye is mentioned instead of some other metaphor being used in its place, as in instances we've already looked at, is presumably because the eye is a topic of the whole 2 verses. These verses reflect a New Testament assumption that eyes emit light or darkness. Because the eyes emit or transmit what it is in the body, an evil eye is one used by someone whose body is in darkness. What we're seeing above is that Bible translators are engaging their craft on the basis of an assumption regarding the normality of European ways of life and understanding. That is, because Europeans do not have or do not take seriously a belief in the evil eye, overt references to this belief are simply being omitted from much of the Bible. Many African people these days use English. What does this imply for their Christian faith? Even if they not use English, research has found that the Bible translators into African languages often have to translate things so that they are the same as an English translation, because people will take English translations as authoritative and will dispute translations that depart from an English language norm. What we can suggest is that a widespread taking of European languages, values and ways of life as normative globally may well be denying African people guidance pertaining to a pernicious belief in their communities, the ability of an evil eye to cause harm. Instead of that belief being addressed in the Bible, as it obviously was in the original languages, contemporary translations conceal it. We might say that belief in the evil eye is the tip of an iceberg. Evil eye beliefs are closely associated with, and very often powered by, an understanding that the evil eye causes harm when its user is envious. An understating of evil eye beliefs then can be said to be an understating of envy. Because envy and the evil eye are foundational aspects of belief in witchcraft, omission of reference to the evil eye in the Bible may have the effect of drawing its teeth with respect to what it can do in countering witchcraft. Instead of witchcraft being countered, it is ignored. When it is ignored, it would seem likely that it continues. It continues unperceived, as African people are expected to believe and think like Europeans, and unchallenged, because the teeth are drawn on the biblical challenge to witchcraft. This can in effect mean that assumptions that African people are not different from Western people that underlie anti-racism results in African people being left in beliefs that cripple them. Addressing these beliefs is costly. It is costly for an African, let us say, as conceding belief in witchcraft, fear of the evil eye, will lose their standing amongst Europeans who scoff at such beliefs. It is costly for a European, because any suggestion that African people are mired in witchcraft beliefs not shared by Europeans will likely have a European accused of being racist. The above says a number of things to me. One thing that it clearly says is that to simply subsume Africa into Europe or America and ways of life lived and guided by Westerners is inadequate. The above instance of the eye is just an illustration of a complexity of different understanding and misunderstanding going on in today's world. As mentioned above, it is not in the interest of African people to point to these issues, or they end up either being racist to themselves or they dent their economic prospects. At the same time, in our age, it has become extraordinarily difficult for anyone to be taken seriously, doing anything that does not align itself with dominant, prominent, contemporary, secular thinking. Just reflecting on much of the discussion about the coronavirus pandemic, African people are often roundly condemned by the powers that be for seeming to be spreading conspiracy theories. From our above discussion, they were quite likely simply expressing life as they understand it. Scientifically informed people simply damned such alternative options for countering the coronavirus. Massive growing capabilities of contemporary microchips and computer processing, combined with the fact that almost all formal global engagement is in European languages and in soft form on the web, enables active countering of conspiracy theories and other fake news, i.e., in the light of the above witchcraft beliefs. This means that that on which African people's lives are founded, what to them is good sense, is ever more effectively occluded, concealed, removed, and damned. When African people are not enabled or permitted to express their sense, then how will they ever be able to transform it? What seems to be in prospect instead is a kind of gradual genocide of a whole branch of humanity, the black or African race. The way to undo that, evident to this speaker, is that European Christian people need urgently to cease finding excuses, such as that God does not exist, that natural selection explains history, that English language education is adequate for African people, and so on, from their responsibility to love their African brothers. Now, love is not money. Money may be a part of it, but love is not money. Love is not donations and gifts. Love is not even inviting African people to study at universities or to live in your countries. Love is, as a biblical theme illustrated most graphically by Jesus himself, sacrificing yourself for your African brothers and sisters. That is, making efforts to reach them in vulnerable ways, using their languages and their resources, not buying them into agreeing with you, with the gospel of Jesus, in a way that speaks to their ways of life. This is perhaps the only way to overcome the pernicious hold of envy on human African societies. The hold of envy, that is witchcraft, on African people should not be underestimated. In a manner of speaking, it's all that there is.